The coffee had gone cold. I don't know how long I'd been sitting there staring at the mug, but the sounds of the ward had settled into that particular late afternoon rhythm I'd come to know better than my own heartbeat. The low hum of the medication cart, someone's IV alarm going off down the hall, a burst of laughter from the nurse's station. 23 years. That's how long I'd been coming to this hospital, and somehow, on that particular Thursday in October, none of it felt like mine anymore. My daughter had called that morning. My daughter Zoe. She's 26 now, which still catches me off guard sometimes, and I remember the exact weight of her on my chest the day she was born, this serious, blinking creature who looked up at me like she already had opinions. She does have opinions. She's never been short of those. "Mom," she said, and I heard it immediately, that careful tone she uses when she's already decided something and is just getting around to telling me. About Thanksgiving, I waited. Derek and I talked, and we think it would be better if... his parents are coming from Victoria, and it's going to be a full house already, and you know how things get when you and Dad are in the same room. I want to say I didn't see it coming, but that would be a lie. My ex-husband, Noel, and I had been divorced for 4 years at that point. The marriage had ended not with a fight, not with anything dramatic really. It had ended the way a long illness ends. Quietly, after everyone had already started grieving. We'd been good partners once, Noel and I. We'd built a life together in Guelph, raised Zoe, put money into a retirement fund, argued about whose turn it was to call the plumber. Then he'd met someone called Adrian at a conference in Toronto, and that was that. I hadn't fought it. Maybe I should have. But I was tired in a way I didn't have language for, and fighting felt like spending the last of something I needed for myself. "I understand," I told Zoe. "You're not upset?" I didn't say that. She was quiet. Then, "Mom, it's just one Thanksgiving." It wasn't just one Thanksgiving, and we both knew it. It was the 3rd year in a row I'd spent the holiday eating leftover soup in my apartment, watching something on Netflix I couldn't have described to you the next morning. But I didn't say that either. I said I loved her. I said give my best to Derek's parents. I said I'd call her next week. Then I sat with the cold coffee for a while. I should tell you something about who I am, because it matters to the rest of this. I'm a registered nurse. I've been one for 27 years. I spent the first 15 of those in emergency, which does something to you, sharpens certain instincts, dulls certain others. I can spot a deteriorating patient from across a room. I can hold a stranger's hand while they're dying and mean it, completely, without performing it. What I'm less good at is advocating for myself in my personal life. The women I work with have told me this, my own therapist has told me this, Zoe has told me this. I show up for everyone else. I am extremely good at showing up for everyone else. Which is maybe why I didn't ask more questions when Noel remarried so quickly. Adrian had appeared in his life, and then in Zoe's life, with a speed that suggested she had been waiting in the wings for a while. I chose not to examine that too closely. She was friendly to me at Zoe's convocation, which was more than I'd expected. Noel seemed happy, or at least settled, which I told myself was what mattered. They moved into a house in Burlington. Adrian had a background in pharmaceutical sales, and Zoe mentioned once, now worked as some kind of independent healthcare consultant. I didn't ask what that meant exactly. I should have asked what that meant exactly. But that October, I didn't know any of that yet. I just knew I wasn't welcome for Thanksgiving. I worked the holiday. That part was easy. There's always someone who wants the shift covered, and I've never minded working Thanksgiving. The ward is quieter in a certain way. People's guards come down. One of my patients that day, a retired postal worker named Hugh who was recovering from hip surgery, told me about his wife of 51 years, how she used to make tourtière from scratch every year and how he hadn't eaten it since she died. We talked for almost an hour. When I left his room I felt okay. That's the word. Okay. Not happy exactly, but okay in the way you feel when you've been useful to someone who needed you. I got home around 8. I made tea. I was planning to call my sister, who lives in Halifax, but I fell asleep on the couch first. My phone woke me at 12:17 a.m., Zoe's name on the screen. I sat up fast. You don't get calls from your child at midnight and not sit up fast, no matter how old they are. "Zoe, what's wrong?" She was crying. Not the way people cry in movies, not prettily. She was gulping, catching herself, losing it again. It took me a full minute to understand what she was saying. "There are people here, Mom, at Dad's house, with badges." They asked for him by name and Adrian went completely white and, "Mom, I don't understand what's happening. Slow down, are you safe? Is your dad safe?" "I don't. Yes, I think so. They're just talking in the dining room." But Mom, one of them said Health Canada, and another one said RCMP. I saw the jacket. I was already on my feet looking for my keys on instinct before I remembered there was nothing for me to do. I wasn't Noel's wife anymore. I wasn't Adrian's anything. Tell me exactly what happened, I said. What Zoe described, in fragments and tears over the next 20 minutes, was this. Dinner had gone normally, or as normally as it ever did. Derek's parents were polite. Adrian had made something ambitious with squash. Noel had opened a good bottle of wine. Then around 11, there'd been a knock at the door. Noel had answered it. 2 people in plainclothes, one in an RCMP jacket. They'd asked to come in. Adrian had stood up from the table and Zoe said her face had done something. She didn't have a word for it. Not guilt exactly, more like recognition. Recognition, I repeated. Like she knew, Zoe said. Like she'd been waiting for them. I sat back down on my couch. The tea I'd made was cold. The TV was still on, muted, and I remember thinking in some detached part of my brain that I should turn it off. Where's your dad now? He's still in there with them. Mom, she broke off. Mom, I heard them say billing fraud. I heard that. What does that mean? I chose my next words very carefully. It means someone filed claims for medical services or products that weren't delivered, or were delivered in a way that wasn't legitimate. It can mean a lot of different things. Why would the RCMP care about that? If it involves federal programs, like if someone billed against provincial health insurance systems across multiple provinces, or against Veterans Affairs, or certain federal pharmaceutical programs, it can become a federal matter. Silence on her end. Then, Adrienne used to work in pharmaceutical sales. I know, I said. And now she does consulting. Dad handles her invoicing. He's always done their paperwork. He's good with numbers. You know how he is. She stopped. And I heard in that stop the exact moment she understood what she might be saying about her father. Zoe, I said quietly. You don't know anything yet. Neither do I. Let the people in that dining room do their job tonight. Should I call a lawyer? That might not be a bad idea. Do you want me to come there? Another pause. Longer. I don't think Adrian would, she started. I'm not asking about Adrian, I said. I'm asking if you need your mother. She cried again. Eventually she said she'd call me in the morning. I stayed on the line until she sounded steadier, and then we said goodnight. I didn't sleep. I made more tea, and I sat in my kitchen and I thought about Noel. We'd met in our 2nd year of nursing school. He switched programs partway through and ended up in healthcare administration, which suited him better anyway. He was good with systems, good with budgets, good at seeing the shape of things. He was not good at saying no to people he loved. That had always been his particular vulnerability. He wanted the people around him to be happy, and he'd bend himself in strange ways to make that happen. And sometimes those bends were costly. I wondered if that was what had happened here. I wondered how long this had been going on. I found out more over the following weeks, in pieces. I want to be clear that I'm not a person who asks for information she isn't offered. I didn't call Noel. I didn't call anyone connected to the investigation. What I knew came from Zoe, who had every right to tell me, and from a few things that became public record eventually. What Adrian had been doing, it turned out, was sophisticated enough that it had taken quite a while to detect. She had established herself as a consultant to several small medical clinics. The kind that operate in strip malls and handle walk-in overflow. The ones that are perpetually understaffed and don't always have tight administrative systems. She had helped them with billing, with documentation, with navigating provincial health insurance codes. She had been paid for this work legitimately at first. Then she had started submitting additional claims. Not enormous ones. That was the thing, Zoe told me later. Nothing that would trigger an obvious flag. Small amounts repeated across dozens of clinics, across 3 provinces, over several years, for services that hadn't been rendered, for patients who hadn't been seen, for referrals that didn't exist. She understood the system well enough to know exactly how much to take, without anyone looking too hard at any single transaction. Noel had done the invoicing, he had set up the billing software. Whether he had understood what he was submitting, that was what the investigation was trying to determine. I thought about that for a long time. Noel, the man I had known for 30 years, the one who drove 40 minutes to return a library book he'd found in Zoe's backpack because he was bothered by the idea of someone going without it, the one who never cheated at board games and got visibly uncomfortable when someone else did. Our townhouse wasn't fancy. I thought about what it would take to blind yourself to something you'd rather not know. I thought about how love can make a person look away from the edges of things, from the details that don't quite fit. I thought about how people perform integrity and whether the performance is the same as the thing itself. I didn't have an answer. I still don't. What I can tell you is that by the time November was half over, Adrian had been formally charged with fraud over $5,000. Multiple counts, under the Criminal Code of Canada. The total amount, when they put it all together, was somewhere north of $400,000. She was released on bail but surrendered her passport. The clinics she'd worked with faced their own investigations, which wasn't fair to the people who ran them, most of whom hadn't known. Noel was not charged. The investigators concluded that while he had managed the billing accounts, there was insufficient evidence that he knew what was being submitted. I know some people found that hard to believe. I'm not sure what I believed. Maybe both things can be true. You can be responsible for not asking the questions you should have asked, and also not have known the answers. There were consequences for him regardless. He had to retain a lawyer. There was a period of months when his accounts were frozen, when the house in Burlington had a lien on it, when he couldn't make certain financial decisions. He lost income. He lost face in a way that doesn't fully restore itself. Zoe called me the night the charges against Adrian became public. She'd seen it on the news. There was a brief item, not front page but not buried either, with Adrian's name and the phrase multi-provincial billing fraud. I don't know what to say to Dad, Zoe told me. You don't have to say anything yet. He seems. I went over there this week and he just looked so old, Mom. Like something left him. I didn't say anything to that. What was there to say? I felt something. I won't pretend I didn't. Not satisfaction exactly, but something in the neighborhood of grief. For the person he'd been. For the version of our life that had once seemed stable. Mom, she said after a while. I'm sorry about Thanksgiving, Zoe. No, I mean it. I made you feel like you weren't wanted, and you were the only one there who actually. She didn't finish the sentence. You were the only one who knew what they were seeing. That wasn't true, entirely. I hadn't known anything. I'd had a feeling, maybe. A nurse's feeling, the kind you develop when you've watched enough situations unfold to recognize a particular quality of wrongness in the air, the way a clinical picture doesn't quite add up. I want you to come for Christmas, Zoe said. If you want to. I want to, I said. Derek's parents will probably be there again. That's fine. I like Derek's parents. She laughed a little. It sounded like her, the serious, blinking creature who'd had opinions from the start. I should tell you how Christmas went, because I think people expect either a triumphant ending or a sad one, and what actually happened was neither. It was just ordinary, in the best way. Zoe made a cranberry sauce with orange peel that she'd seen on someone's Instagram, and Derek's father taught me a card game I'd never heard of, and we put too much wine in the gravy and it turned out better than usual. Noel wasn't there. I wasn't thinking about Noel very much that day. What I was thinking about at one point in the afternoon was a patient I'd had once, years ago, emergency department. A woman who'd come in alone at 2 a.m, no next of kin to call, nobody who knew she was there. She'd had a treatable condition, and we treated it, and she went home. I had wondered sometimes what her life looked like. Whether anyone knew what had happened to her on that one dark early morning, when she'd walked into the light of our ER and let us help her. I don't know why I thought about her at Christmas. Maybe because I understood something different about her now than I had then. There is a particular freedom in needing nothing from a person who wronged you. Not revenge, not acknowledgement, not even an apology. Zoe had apologized. That was enough. Noel had not apologized, and I found that I did not need him to. The RCMP and Health Canada had done the work that was theirs to do. The courts would do whatever they did. None of that required anything from me. I had done in the end one very simple thing. Years ago, when I'd first heard the word consultant and wondered what it meant, I had asked a colleague at the hospital about the billing codes Adrian apparently worked with. Just curious, I'd said. My colleague had explained the system, and I'd filed the information away, and then a few months later, when something Zoe said didn't quite line up, a number that seemed off. A reference to a clinic in New Brunswick that Adrian had apparently billed from, despite never having mentioned traveling there. I had passed along the name of a contact in healthcare compliance. Just in case, I'd said. I never found out for certain whether that was how the investigation began. It might have started somewhere else entirely. These things often move along multiple channels at once. But I do know that when Zoe asked me, much later, how I'd stayed so calm through all of it, the Thanksgiving call, The week's uncertainty, the news items, all of it. I didn't have a very interesting answer. I told her the truth. I've been a nurse for 27 years. I've seen a lot of situations that looked chaotic from the outside, but had a clear logic underneath, if you were willing to follow it. I've learned that the most useful thing you can do in most circumstances is stay present, pay attention, and make the referral when it's needed. That's all I did. She laughed again and shook her head, and reached over and stole the last of the orange cranberry sauce right off my plate, which she has done since she was 7 years old and has never once apologized for. I let her.